I remember the taste of copper in my mouth when they first told me I had been chosen. The words came from Adept Thalison, delivered in that monotone voice all administratum clerks seemed to perfect after their first decade of service. Citizen Kalin Voss, designation 77, Alpha 9992. You have been selected for the Emperor's sacred service. He did not look up from his data slate as he spoke. His augmetic eye clicked softly as it processed the information scrolling across the screen. The sound reminded me of the grinding wheels in the manufactorum where I had worked for the past 15 years. I stood barefoot in the grey processing chamber, the cold metal biting into my skin, and tried to understand what those words meant. Sacred service. Every citizen of Terra had heard the whispers. Those who disappeared into the depths of the Imperial Palace, never to return. We told ourselves they were blessed. We told ourselves they served a higher purpose. We told ourselves many things, just to sleep at night. The copper taste grew stronger. I realized I had bitten my tongue. There must be some mistake, I said, though my voice sounded small in the vast, echoing chamber. I am just a factory worker. I maintain the grinding wheels for wheat processing in Sector Gamma 7. I have no special skills, no training. No, there is no mistake. Adept Thalison finally looked up. His human eye was brown, tired, the skin around it pale from decades without natural light. The selection process is thorough. Your genetic markers, your psychic resonance levels, your psychological profile, all have been reviewed and approved. You will report to Sanctum level Omega 33 at the 19th hour for preparation. The chamber felt smaller suddenly. The beige walls pressed inward, suffocating. The lumens overhead hummed with a frequency that made my teeth ache. I became aware of my breathing, shallow. The air tasted of metal and disinfectant. What exactly is sacred service? I asked. For the first time, something flickered across the adept's face. Pity, or perhaps envy. You will sustain the light that guides humanity through the darkness, he said. There is no greater honor. The journey from the processing chamber back to my hab unit took 47 minutes through the transport tubes. 47 minutes in which I stared at my reflection in the scratched plexiglass windows and tried to reconcile the face looking back at me with the words I had just heard. Chosen, selected, sacred service. The terms felt foreign, like a language I had once known but forgotten. My reflection was unremarkable. 34 years old, brown hair that had already begun to thin at the crown. Grey eyes that held no particular wisdom or strength. A thin scar across my cheek from a grinding wheel accident 3 years ago. Hands calloused from decades of labor, fingernails permanently stained with oil. An ordinary man living an ordinary life, or so I thought. The hab unit was exactly as I had left it. A single room, 8 meters by 6, a cot, a desk, a food preparation unit. A lavatory alcove, the walls the same institutional beige as the chamber. On the desk sat a single picked frame. My parents on their wedding day, decades ago, both long dead now. Their smiles captured in a moment when the future seemed bright. I sat on the edge of the cot and stared at their faces. What would they think of their son's sacred service? Would they be proud or terrified? I realized I did not know what to think myself. The hours passed strangely. I tried to eat but found no appetite. Corpse starch, flavored to mimic some long extinct meat, turned to ash in my mouth. I tried to read from my small collection of approved texts, but the words blurred together, stripped of meaning. The Primer Imperialis, which I had read countless times, might as well have been written in an alien tongue. I tried to sleep, but found myself staring at the ceiling panels, counting the imperfections in the metal plating. 63 dents, 12 rust spots, one panel misaligned. When the chime sounded for the 19th hour, I was ready. The transport capsule that carried me to Sanctum Omega 33 was unlike anything I had seen in my years on Terra. Most citizen transports were purely utilitarian, bare metal, harsh lumens, recycled air. This was different. The capsule was smaller. The walls were lined with what appeared to be real wood. Brass fittings gleamed in the warm light. The air smelled faintly of incense rather than disinfectant. There were 7 other passengers with me, all selected for sacred service. All silent. The woman across from me was young, perhaps 25. Her complexion was pale, her posture hunched from years over data slates. Her hands shook as she clutched a pendant in the shape of the Imperial Aquila. When she caught me watching, she offered a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. Mira Ka, she said softly. Data analyst, 3rd class, sector beta. Kalin Voss, I replied. Maintenance technician, Gamma 7. The elderly man beside her looked up at that. His hands bore burn scars, thick and ridged. Marcus Thorne, he said, his voice rough from decades breathing industrial fumes. Fuel processor, 38 years in the deep works. Figured I'd die down there among the pipes. Never expected this one by one. The others introduced themselves. Helena Vex, a young woman barely 18, raised in the Manufactoria since childhood. Dmitry Vasquez, middle-aged, his augmetic arm marking him as a former servitor operator. Jiren Cole, a restless teenager, likely pulled from the lower hives. Senna Thale, an older woman whose weathered face spoke of years in the agri-domes, coaxing life from poisoned soil. Ordinary people, workers, the backbone of the Imperium's endless machine. None of us heroes, none of us special, just chosen. Do any of you know what sacred service actually means? Dmitry asked at last, his augmetic fingers tapping nervously against his leg. No one answered immediately. Finally, Marcus spoke. My grandfather used to tell stories. He claimed to know someone who knew someone who worked in the deep levels of the palace. He said there were places down there where they fed souls to machines, turned people into batteries for things too terrible to name. That's just superstition, Mira said, though her voice lacked conviction. The Emperor protects. Whatever we're called to do, Helena added quietly, it serves a purpose. All service serves a purpose. That doesn't mean we survive it, she whispered. The transport capsule began to descend more rapidly. Through the narrow windows, I saw the architecture changing as we went deeper. Utilitarian corridors gave way to stone. Gothic arches rose overhead, carved with shifting symbols that hurt to look at. The air grew thicker, heavy with incense and the metallic bite of ozone. Servo skulls drifted past, their empty sockets glowing red. Massive machines churned in shadowed chambers, their functions beyond my comprehension. Pipes as thick as hab block corridors carried fluids that glowed with an inner light. Cables as large as transport tubes pulsed with current, and everywhere, on every wall, every surface, was the Aquila, the two-headed eagle. But down here, it seemed different. Predatory, not protective, watching us, waiting to devour. The descent lasted what felt like hours. We passed foundries burning with artificial suns, vast libraries where servo scribes inked scripture on human skin. Chambers of vat-grown things I dared not stare at. The weight of millennia pressed down on us. Faith, machinery, death, all merging into one. At last, the capsule shuddered to a halt. The doors hissed open. A corridor stretched into shadows, lined with statues of saints I did not recognize. their faces frozen in ecstasy and agony, their hands outstretched toward something unseen. "Citizens," came a voice from outside the transport. "You will disembark, you will follow, you will not speak unless spoken to." The figure wore red robes, a tech adept, his face hidden by a brass mask in the shape of a human skull. His movements were precise, mechanical, as he gestured for us to leave the capsule. More robed figures waited behind him, still as the statues. We followed. The air grew thicker with each step. Sanctity and electricity filled my lungs. The hum of generators, the drone of chanting tech priests, the whisper of servo skulls passing overhead, and beneath it all, too deep to hear, yet impossible not to feel, a low thrumming, the heartbeat of something vast and terrible. We passed through checkpoints guarded by Skitari rangers. Their augmetic limbs clicked and whirred as they scanned us with devices I did not know. Each checkpoint took us deeper, closer to whatever fate awaited. The corridors shifted again. Gothic stone gave way to something older, cruder, rough-hewn walls, symbols carved into the rock. Jagged, painful to look at, faces etched into stone, their eyes seeming to follow us. Words in languages that had been old when terror itself was young. The air thickened, breathing became an effort, heat surged, then gave way to cold. That bit into bone. Lumens flickered, plunging us into moments of suffocating dark before sputtering back to life. It was in one of those dark moments that I heard it, a sound so faint it was almost imagined, but filled with such anguish that it clawed directly at my soul. A scream, impossibly distant, echoing from a place no sound should reach. The light returned. The tech adepts marched on, indifferent, but the sound stayed with me. We came at last to a massive archway flanked by 2 custodian guards. Even silent, even still, their presence was overwhelming. These were not soldiers, they were something more. Crafted by the Emperor's own hand, perfection made manifest. Their golden armor gleamed in the dim light. Their guardian spears hummed faintly with restrained energy. They did not acknowledge us. They did not need to. Their very existence told us that we had reached a place of supreme importance. Beyond the archway lay a circular chamber with a domed ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. Thrones lined the walls, dozens of them, arranged in concentric circles around a raised dais. And on that dais stood a throne greater than all the rest, larger, more elaborate, more terrible. It was carved from a black material that seemed to drink in the light. Tubes and cables snaked away from its base, vanishing into the floor and walls. Crystalline structures jutted from its arms and back, like malignant growths pulsing with their own inner light. And the other thrones, they were occupied. At first I thought the figures in them were corpses, but then I saw the rise and fall of their chests. They were alive, their eyes rolled back, showing only whites. Tubes pierced their arms, their spines, their skulls. Cables connected them to the throne. The crystalline growths spread across them, linking them in a web of pulsing light. They were not dead, they were something worse. They were part of the machine. "Behold," said one of the tech adepts, his vox grill distorting his voice into something hollow. "The preparatory chambers for sacred service. Here, the faithful are transformed. Here, individual existence ends and true purpose begins." Mira began to cry softly, her sobs echoing against the stone. Marcus reached for her hand, though his own trembled. Jiren, the boy, had gone pale as ash, his mouth hanging open as he stared. What happens to them? Helena whispered. The tech adept turned his skull mask toward her. They become part of something greater. Their life force, their psychic potential, their very souls are channeled into the great work. They sustain the light that guides humanity through the darkness. The Astronomican, I breathed, the realization hitting like a blade of ice. Indeed, the adept confirmed, the beacon that allows ships to navigate the warp, that shields humanity from chaos, that maintains the fragile barrier between reality and nightmare. It requires constant sacrifice, 1,000 souls a day. For 10,000 years, the words crushed me. I had heard of the Astronomican, of course. Everyone had. The great light of holy terror, the eternal beacon. But I had never thought of the cost, never connected it to this. Never imagined the truth. 1,000 souls a day, 10,000 years. Billions upon billions of lives, ordinary citizens pulled from ordinary lives, transformed into fuel to keep the beacon burning, the tech adept said. You have been chosen to join the number, to add your essence to the Emperor's will made manifest. How do you choose? Dmitri asked, his augmetic fingers clenched and unclenched, gears whirring softly. How do you decide who lives and who dies? The selection is thorough, the tech adept replied. Genetic markers indicating psychic potential, psychological profiles suggesting stability under stress, physical conditions that allow for optimal transfer of energy, age ranges that provide the greatest yield. Thousands of variables are calculated. The algorithms identify those best suited. Best suited to die, he meant. Best suited to burn. And if we refuse? Senna asked, her voice hard as stone, her weathered face set in stubborn lines. The adept turned his mask toward her with mechanical precision. Refusal is not possible. The Emperor's will cannot be denied. You may approach your transformation with acceptance and find peace in service, or you may resist and find only suffering. The outcome is the same. I looked again at the chamber, at the dozens of thrones, each occupied by what had once been people. At the black throne, pulsing at the center, crystalline veins spreading like roots into every soul. The central throne, I said. It is different. Indeed, the adept replied. It serves as the focusing mechanism. It channels the combined psychic energy of all connected souls. It also houses the intelligence that coordinates the entire process. What intelligence? I asked. For the first time, there was hesitation in the adept's mechanical voice. A fragment of the Emperor's consciousness, severed from the whole, tasked with overseeing this facility. 10,000 years of death have shaped it in ways we do not fully understand. The words froze my blood. A piece of the Emperor himself, bound here, watching 1,000 deaths every day, 10,000 years of endless sacrifice. What could that do to any mind, even his? You will be processed in order of selection, the adept continued, gesturing to the thrones. The procedure is brief. Your consciousness will endure for a time. Then you will be absorbed into the greater whole. Mira was first. They led her to one of the smaller thrones. She walked as if in a dream, clutching her Aquila pendant so tightly her knuckles turned white. When they lowered her into the seat, she looked back at us, her eyes wide with terror. Tell them, she whispered. Tell them I served willingly. Tell them I died with honor. But there would be no one left to tell. The needles pierced her arms with surgical precision. Tubes sank into her neck, her spine, her skull. The crystalline filaments reached from the central throne like grasping fingers. When they touched her flesh, her body convulsed violently. Her scream filled the chamber, a sound of pure agony that seemed to echo forever. Then silence. Her eyes rolled back, her body slack, her soul gone. "Connection established," one adept said flatly. "Integration efficiency, 97%. Mirror ceased to exist. What remained was a conduit, a living battery. Marcus went next. The old fuel processor walked with dignity, his steps steady despite the tremor in his hands. He lowered himself into the throne without resistance. "Worked with fire all my life," he muttered as the needles found their marks. "Fitting that I should become fire in the end." His transformation was quieter than Mira's, but no less final. One moment he was a man with decades of labor behind him. The next, a vessel. Helena followed, then Dmitri, then Jiren, the boy, tears streaming down his face as the crystalline filaments pierced his skull. Each transformation was different, each scream unique, but the end was always the same. Senna, the agri-dome worker, was last before me. She stared at the throne with open hatred, her weathered hands clenched into fists. 40 years, she spat. 40 years I spent trying to make things grow in poisoned soil, and this is my reward? Your reward, the adept replied coldly, is eternal service. Your essence will guide ships across the galaxy. Your sacrifice will preserve millions of lives. What greater purpose could there be? The purpose of living, she hissed. But she sat anyway, because there was no choice. Her transformation was violent. Her body convulsed, thrashing against the restraints. Her scream tore through the chamber until at last she went still. But even as the crystalline growth consumed her, something in her seemed to resist. The readings on the adept's instruments flickered wildly, as if her very defiance lingered, fighting even as she was consumed. And then it was my turn. The throne was warm as I sat, the heat radiating from within, or perhaps from the countless souls already bound into its structure. The surface felt organic, disturbingly alive, like tissue stretched over stone. Restraints clamped onto my arms and legs. I turned my head just enough to glimpse the central throne. In the crystalline matrix, I saw movement, a face, human once, but twisted by millennia of exposure to forces beyond comprehension. The fragment of the Emperor's mind, watching, endless eyes filled with the weight of 1,000,000 deaths. And those eyes, they turned to me. The first needle slid home. The pain was indescribable, not merely physical. It was the pain of my essence unraveling, my memories being sifted through by something vast, cold, and utterly indifferent. The day I first worked in the manufactorum, the pride of repairing a grinding mechanism, the girl I had loved for 3 weeks before she was transferred, the taste of real meat on Foundation Day, the sound of rain against the hab block roof, all catalogued, all filed away, all stripped from me. But there was something else, something older, sadder. The fragment of the Emperor's mind was not just observing, it was speaking. "I am sorry," it whispered, "so very sorry." The voice was not mechanical, not divine. It was the voice of a man who had carried a burden too long, a man who had sacrificed too much. Why? I managed to ask, though whether aloud or only in thought I did not know. Images poured into me. The galaxy spread across eternity. Millions of worlds, each fragile, each threatened. Ships moving through the warp, guided by the Astronomican. Humanity clinging to survival, hemmed in by enemies on every side. Chaos fleets rising from the eye. Tyrannid hive ships, devourers from beyond the stars. Orc war bands swelling like storms. Necron tombs awakening after aeons. The choice was not between good and evil. It was survival or extinction. The price is too high, I said. Yes, the voice replied, but the alternative is worse. More visions followed. A galaxy without the Astronomican, ships adrift in the warp, their crews driven mad by the tides of chaos, worlds cut off, falling one by one, defenseless, human civilization collapsing into fragments, each prey to ancient horrors. And worse, the fate of souls in a galaxy without the Emperor's light. Not death, but torment, eternal agony in the warp, consciousness twisted, stretched across eons of suffering, humanity broken, remade into nothing but food for gods of nightmare. This is the choice, the voice said. Sacrifice the few to preserve the many, or lose everything. I felt it then. The weight, 10 million choices, 10 million sacrifices, carried by the fragment of a man who had once been mortal, who still remembered what it meant to hope. Will it ever end? I asked, my sense of self fraying at the edges. The pause was endless. Then the answer, I do not know. I hope, I pray, but hope is not enough. Prayer is not enough. Only sacrifice is enough. My consciousness dissolved. My body was still bound in the throne, but my soul was drawn into something vast. I was no longer alone. I felt Mira, her sharp, analytical mind guiding currents of energy. Marcus, steady and strong, lending stability. Helena, Dmitri, Jiren, Senna, each of them, their essence woven into the whole, and beyond them, thousands, millions, 10,000 years of voices bound together, farmers, soldiers, workers, scholars, children, elders, every kind of human life, all one, all burning, all sacrificed, yet alive in something greater. We were the Astronomican. From this new perspective, I saw the galaxy not as stars, but as arteries of light. Every imperial world glowing faintly, connected by threads of warp roots, ships moving like blood cells, carrying hope, carrying war, carrying humanity itself, and guiding them, us, our light, our pain, our sacrifice, the beacon shining from holy terror across the void, every safe arrival, every colony founded, every world held against the dark, all bought with our souls. But we were more than fuel. We were a choir, our voices joined with the Emperor's will, his mind vast, alien, eternal, but still tethered to humanity by us. Through us, he saw the galaxy. Through us, he felt its dangers. Through us, he intervened. I felt his attention sweep across the stars. Entire fleets noticed. Wars shifted. Entire worlds lived or died on the currents of his will. And still, at his core, something human remained. He remembered every soul, every memory, every name. The rain I had loved on a hab-block roof, the taste of meat on Foundation Day, the girl whose name I had already forgotten. He remembered it all. We were not fuel, we were reminders, proof of what was worth saving, proof of why the light must never go out. Days and weeks passed. If such words still had meaning, through the Astronomican, I learned to see, to feel the pulse of a million worlds. Ships called out for guidance, and we answered. Our light carved paths through the warp. Colonies begged for aid, and the Emperor's will flowed through us to assess, to command, to save, or to abandon, but always, beyond the light, the darkness pressed in. Chaos fleets gathered in the eye of terror, their hulls twisted by madness, their prows crowned with demonic faces. Princes of the warp marshaled their armies, preparing to strike at the material realm. Tyrannid hive fleets crept in from the galactic rim, endless hunger driving them. Their splinter fleets already devoured sectors, leaving only silence and dust. Even their scouts were enough to consume entire entire systems. Orc empires rose and swelled, war bands merging into tides of green destruction. What began as raids became invasions. What began as invasions became wars that could drown whole subsectors. Their warlords grew smarter with each battle, and their laughter carried through the void like thunder. Necron tombs stirred in the dark. Planets long thought barren cracked open, spilling armies of living metal into the stars. Ancient weapons lit up battlefields, reducing Imperial science to the toys of children, and with them came their cold dream, a galaxy of silence, stripped of life, stripped of change, and worse things, older things, beings that dwelled in the cracks between reality. They pressed against the veil, whispering promises to the desperate, to the ambitious, to the damned, promises of power, promises of freedom, always ending in corruption, always ending in ruin. The Emperor saw it all. Through us, through the light we sustained. His mind stretched across every world, every ship, every prayer whispered in the dark, and somehow, impossibly, he held it together, not through hope, not through kindness, but through sheer will, through the refusal to surrender, through a burden no other being could endure. And I felt his grief in moments between crises, when the weight of 1,000 emergencies paused for a breath. I felt it, his awareness of irony, his knowledge of what he had become. He had set out to destroy gods, to free humanity from superstition, and now he sat as the God Emperor, worshipped as a deity, sustained by blood and sacrifice, a tyrant cloaked in golden light, a monster and a savior both. He knew, he mourned it, he endured it, because the alternative was worse, because no one else could bear the burden, because without him, humanity would die. Through the Astronomican, I felt the throne itself. It was not merely a seat of power. It was a nexus, a bridge between dimensions, a relic of the dark age of technology. Once, it had been built for another purpose, a gateway, a device to pierce reality itself. The Emperor had taken it, changed it, bound himself to it, and for 10,000 years it had sustained him, sustained us all, but now it was failing. I could feel it in every current of energy. Systems that had once run flawlessly faltered. Components older than empires cracked, their strength bleeding away. Every day, 1,000 souls were consumed, yet still the beacon faltered, still the cracks spread deeper. The sacrifice that had once been enough was no longer enough, and through our shared mind I glimpsed his thoughts, constant calculations, endless predictions, probability matrices stretching across centuries, and every one of them converging on the same point. The Golden Throne would fail, if not in decades, then in centuries. But fail it would, and when it did, the Emperor would die. The Astronomican would go dark, and humanity, scattered, isolated, blind, would be swallowed whole unless something changed. I felt his attention turn, not inward, but outward, to a region of space far from terror, to a single world where something impossible was happening. Innovation. For the first time in 10 millennia, humanity had created something new, not merely maintained the past, not merely repeated old rituals of the Mechanicus, but discovered, advanced, built. It was fragile, small, a spark in the dark, but it was hope. If it could be protected, nurtured, spread, it might save us, a future that did not rely on endless sacrifice. A future where the Imperium might endure not only through blood, but through progress. But the spark had been noticed. Chaos reached for it, eager to twist it into a weapon. Orcs drew near, hungry for plunder. Tyrannid scouts prowled, tasting the promise of life. The spark could be snuffed out as easily as it had begun. The Emperor's will focused like a blade. Across the choir, across the galaxy, we felt the shift. His strength poured outward, bending fate itself. Space Marines received visions that led them to the threatened world. Guard regiments found themselves reinforced in impossible ways. Tech priests unearthed fragments of lost STCS, giving them the tools to protect what had been made. The cost was immense. We felt it in the choir. Souls burned out, consumed utterly by the strain. Others diminished, shadows of themselves. But the spark endured. For now, and still it was not enough. The forces against us were too many, too strong, too determined. Something more would be needed, something not attempted since the days of the heresy, something the Emperor had sworn never to unleash again. And in the depths of the throne, ancient systems stirred, forgotten protocols awoke. The Emperor reached deeper, drawing upon reserves buried since the galaxy burned beneath Horus's betrayal. And we felt it, the beginning of transformation. At first it was subtle, a shift in the currents of energy, a ripple in the choir, but then we felt it fully. The walls between worlds grew thin. The boundary between the warp and reality blurred. Not the chaotic storm of the dark gods, not madness without form, but something controlled, something directed. And yet, the Emperor was remaking reality. We did not vanish, we merged, bound together, not as fragments, but as foundation. Every sacrifice across 10 millennia, every soul of his mind in the Astronomican, merging into every death great. We were drawn into all of it, was drawn into the moment, not erased, all of it built into transformed. We became not annihilation. Our memories became his memories. The Emperor, our experiences became his unbearable. Our humanity became the seed of his divinity, and he changed. He drew the God Emperor, ceased to be a title. He became cracked and burned, not a man systems on a throne that had not endured 10,000 years collapsed into but a God, and we, vast, the choir, we burned. His light spread across the galaxy, gently, not as a beacon fueled by death that consumed all we had been. The Astronomican no longer devoured souls. Faces, it blazed brighter than ever, sustained not by sacrifice, flickered by him, vanished by Marcus, by the countless lives crumbled into ash, one by one. The voices I had across the Imperium, until only the fire remained before them, safe and clear. Worlds long lost felt his presence descend upon them, guiding, protecting. The enemies of mankind reeled as reality itself turned against them. Chaos fleets faltered, their demons cast back howling. Orc warbands fell into infighting, their rage twisted inward. Tyrannid swarms recoiled from systems suddenly unpalatable to their hunger. The dawn had come. The golden throne lay silent, broken. The chamber of thrones stood empty, their crystalline webs shattered. The daily sacrifice of 1,000 souls was no longer demanded. The Emperor had transcended. He was everywhere now, in every star that warmed a human world, in every breath drawn by the faithful, in every prayer whispered in the dark. And we who had given everything, endured within him, not erased, not forgotten, preserved forever as part of his infinite mind. Our small lives, our fleeting joys, our brief loves, all woven into his being. Kalin Voss, maintenance worker of Sector Gamma 7, no longer existed as a man, but his memories lived on. The girl he had loved, the sound of rain, the pride of work well done, all of it eternal now, all of it part of God. Sacred service had not been death, it had been transformation. 10,000 years of sacrifice had paid their price in full. The Emperor was risen, humanity endured, and the song of the faithful, our song, became not a dirge but a hymn. The Emperor protects forever.